but I have over 20 years experience in the TVET system. Originally, I was a chef. I have a bachelor degree in philosophy and a master's in TVET, and going into the teaching of TVET, of teaching of cookery, brought those worlds together for me. I have worked as a teacher, as a manager, a leader, and now as an executive in the TVET system. And as stated, I'm the Executive Director of International Education here at Holmesglen Institute. James?
Oh. Hello, everyone.
Thank you.
Lovely to be here with you. We are very fortunate today. It's a beautiful sunny day in Melbourne, but I think it started off at 4 degrees this morning, which is a temperature that I don't think Jakarta has ever experienced. So, but it's a great pleasure to be here. So my name is James Stafford. I look after our offshore activities. My history is I started in the TAFE sector in the technical in the mid-1980s. So I've been in for a very long time, starting off originally as a music teacher, in fact, and eventually moving on to management and eventually into the international sector. So I'm very proud to represent Holmesglen in that area, and I'm very much looking forward to speaking to you today.
Thank you, James. Baik, Bapak Ibu yang baru bergabung, silakan absen dulu, matikan mic Anda, matikan kamera Anda. Kita akan segera mulai. Hari ini kita akan berbicara dengan topik bagaimana membangun sistem pendidikan dan pelatihan vokasi daring, termaksud rancangan dasarnya, persyaratan sistemnya, dan juga biaya yang diperlukan. Baik, kita mulai. So I will now leave the floor to you, Andrew and James. You can start. You have around 1 hour for presentation, and then we're going to follow up with questions. On to you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Nia. And I might just start by sharing my screen, if I may. Excellent. Well, as written here, our discussion today is around setting up an online TVET system, and this is very much from the Holmesglen experience. In terms of what we will be covering today, there's let me just find a way of moving us along. Here we go. In our discussion today, we'll be highlighting a couple of different areas in particular. How we have developed online tools to help our teachers move into the world of remote delivery and online teaching and learning. And we'll look at how we developed their skills to develop effective materials through our online learning management system. And we're conscious that many of you will have a different learning management system to us, but I think that the principles are quite similar. We are keen to reflect on how some of the remote delivery experiences that we have had over past years delivering offshore has informed our current remote delivery for local students in this very unusual period that we find ourselves in. We're going to look at some case studies to try and illustrate that, and we'll share some of our experiences of what worked and some of our experiences of what didn't work, because I think both of them are valuable learning opportunities. The one that we will look at in quite some detail is a case study of how we were able to migrate what was going to be a face-to-face program for delivery in China, where when the COVID-19 crisis hit, we moved to be able to deliver in a remote and electronic format, and so too, in doing so, meet our clients' needs. So Hopefully this will be informative and illustrative, and we're certainly very keen that if you have further questions of us outside of this workshop, then we would very much welcome follow-ups if you wish. A little bit of information about Holmesglen Institute of TAFE, where we work. It's been around for about 40 years and is the largest of Victoria's vocational education and training providers. We're one of Australia's only educational institutions that delivers senior secondary education programs, TVET programs, and then up to diplomas and into higher education and postgraduate programs as well. We have 7 metropolitan campuses across Melbourne and 1 regional campus. We have over 25,000 students, of which 3,000 are international students. And we're based here in Melbourne, which is an incredibly rich multicultural centre of city in Australia, a lovely place to live, 5 million people. At the moment, we are in lockdown, and which is probably the same for you. But Melbourne is usually a very, very lovely place to live. Further about Holmesglen, we are a comprehensive public provider. We run programs that range from English language through to very traditional trades, building and construction, cookery, close to my heart. As I said before, I am a chef, and then into the paraprofessional and so forth. Um, that is a brief summary of Holmesglen and who we are, and I will hand to James about our offshore experience.
Thank you very much, Andrew. So Holmesglen has been possibly the most active of the institutes across Australia in the international sector, starting very early. So we were the first ones to be registered as an English language provider, and then immediately moved into offshore programs. So we've had, as Andrew mentioned, we have many international students. We have more international students than any other provider in the institute, non-university provider in Australia. So at the moment, that of course has got issues with travel restrictions and so on. So we are looking for other options, which we will be discussing today. So we've had over 25 years working in transnational, delivering offshore. In Indonesia, we have an English language centre attached to the Universitas Muhammadiyah in Tangerang. And we have many partnerships in China, Mongolia, Korea, Japan. And one of the features of our work for many years has been working in Middle East with large projects in Bahrain and Qatar. Now, Andrew, I'll rely upon you to move on to the next slide. Thank you. So Indonesia, we have been very active in Indonesia. So as I mentioned, the Muhammadiyah Foundation is an important key partnership for us. You will all be familiar with Muhammadiyah. So we've undertaken huge amounts of English teacher training programs across many areas in Indonesia with Muhammadiyah. And we have, of course, the English Language Centre in Tangerang. So it says over 1,000 graduates, but it's actually very much more than that. So as well as this, we've also been very active working with the TAFE Victoria Consortium. There's the Victorian TAFEs are very, very active internationally. And so with our partners, Kangan, Melbourne Polytechnic, Box Hill, Chisholm and others, we are doing a number of projects throughout Indonesia. Currently, we're working with the Indo-Australian company PTODG, providing electrical training, quite similar to what we're doing in Mongolia, which I will discuss a little later. Here's a few things that we are doing at the moment. We, with our other partners in the TAFE sector, we're working with the Indonesia Vocational Higher Education Revitalisation Program, who are interested in online short courses. Here's a few that we are offering. We are also doing IST, which International Skills Training, Teacher Training, and we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail later. Ministry of Finance, we're also offering short courses there. Part of my team, we have a native Indonesian speaker with us, so we're very pleased to have that form of engagement with Indonesia. So the current environment for you, it's interesting. I was looking up the costs of a gigabyte of data in Indonesia. It costs about $1 Australian, whereas we pay about $2.50. So it's 250% more expensive for us to get data in Australia. So data is relatively cheap, but as you can see there, but not particularly fast. So one of the issues and one of the things that we certainly had to consider in speaking to you about this, about the options, keeping in consideration that fast download speeds and very strong connections are going to be a concern for you, particularly perhaps in more remote areas. We were looking at places, examining places like Papua and West Papua, and almost having no connectivity. Java will, of course, be, and Sumatra will do well. Your usage is third highest consumers of social media in the world. I mean, it's quite extraordinary figures. But with a saturated 4G network, the rollout of 5G may be something that is going to make a big change for you in the future. So I'll hand back to Andrew.
Thank you very much, James. I wanted to touch on a little bit about the effect of COVID-19 on TVET in Australia. Obviously, this has impacted all parts of life and work and study, and as I'm sure it is for you too. Many of our educational institutions have closed. Our schools for quite some time moved into a remote delivery format for children. So children stayed at home, and all schoolwork was delivered remotely. We opened up again for a while with schools, and it looks like we're going back down. Some educational institutions have closed and remain closed, but as TAFEs, as public TVET providers, our government was very clear that we should stay open and continue to teach remotely where possible, but with safe social distancing if not, with the understanding that the training that we do often is absolutely vital for the continuation of industry. And if we stopped doing our delivery, then aspects of industry would grind to a halt. So there was a recognition of the very essential role that TVET plays. Now, at Homeschool, we also considered that there's a possibility that we could turn this crisis into an opportunity for improvement. We thought that the current situation would open up opportunities for government, educational institutions, and businesses to look at an alternate delivery methodology or methodologies, and to focus on developing the existing workforce. And with extensive partnerships through industry, community, government, and internationally, we've sought to support our partners in making improvements wherever possible. At Holmes-Glen, as I said before, we have a comprehensive range of programs that we offer. Some were able to be moved into a remote delivery, an online delivery format, much faster than others. For example, academic programs, very theoretical, could be migrated quite easily, and we moved very quickly. It took about 3 weeks, and most of our courses had been moved into a remote delivery format. However, you would also be aware that in the TVET system, we do a lot of kinesthetic training, teaching and learning. There is a lot of very practical teaching and learning, and some of that is more difficult to migrate into a remote delivery format than others. For example, welding or engineering, very difficult to move across into a remote delivery format. The other sort of training we do is in the workplace, and we have several programs that are by regulation require work placement, students to actually spend some time in the workplace and doing learning there. Those opportunities have all dried up at the moment. There's a great deal of caution out there in workplaces, and students, I'm afraid, have been regarded as an additional risk for industry, and so many of those work placements have stopped as well. I'll show you just some photos very quickly about how we have run social distancing in some of the trade areas, and these in particular are in our electrical department, and you'll see that we have got markings on the floor to ensure that there are 4 square meters around each person's workstation. We've got caution signs on the floor and on the walls, and you can see on the left-hand side of that door there, where every room now states how many people we are able to have in that room in a safe, socially safe distance environment. Again, markings on the floor, so every second workstation has been taken out so that we can ensure social distancing, and even our service areas have been installed with screens and markers on the floor. And I'm sure that some of this is very familiar to you too. James.
Thank you. I'll unmute myself and that will work much better. Thank you very much, Andrew. I'm going to talk a little bit about our online technology, what we actually employ. So we use the student learning management system Brightspace, which you may also know as D2L. We use this integrated with Cisco WebEx meetings and Teams. So participants will need to use these things. You do need a reasonable connection to data, but it can be used on iPads, smartphones, and we will give examples of this a little later. WebEx has been a little bit of an issue for us because it works best with Chrome as a web browser. And as a result of that, there are places in the world, China, where Chrome is not permitted as a Google product. So this has led to some challenges for us. What we do is all of our WebEx sessions are recorded, and we make all of these available immediately after, somewhat similar to what Nia will do for us here, and we understand that this will appear later. So we also use Moodle, which was a system that we used originally, but we still use it for our work in Mongolia, so which I'll speak of a little later. As well as as well as online, we also have distance learning capability. So that'll be the next slide, Andrew, if you could. Thanks very much. Yes. So those solutions are for circumstances such as could happen in Indonesia, where the connectivity is poor or intermittent or in some way restricted. So for those, we know that Zoom and whatever it might be, WebEx and others are not appropriate. So these are circumstances in which we can move to text-based solutions. So we can either send off electronic files so that things can be printed out, or we can use, we can ship if that's appropriate. So we use things as simple as mobile phone support to make sure that our students do not feel isolated. So in our other regions, WeChat, of course, Skype, Kakao Talk in Korea, WhatsApp, or just a plain FaceTime calls are also used. So we've even had to, in certain circumstances, have to avoid attachments. So we would send text, plain text messages across using, as I mentioned in here, PDF documents, which can be reduced in size because where that becomes a large issue. So our Brightspace can still be used with under certain circumstances with weaker connections where we are not doing synchronous delivery. So it's still quite possible to do that. Andrew, I'll hand back to you.
Thank you, James. This is a point at which I'd like to share a resource that we developed, and I will move it across into your screen. We had amongst our teaching staff mixed capability for the delivery of education and training into a remote mode. We also found that there was mixed capability amongst our student population, and they needed support with the migration across into an online or remote delivery mode. This is what we call our remote teaching and learning master course, and it's a set of instructions and resources for teachers in their migration of programs into a remote teaching space. And I want to take you through some of the sorts of things that we assisted our teachers with through this. Now, you'll note up the top here, this is actually in Brightspace itself. So teachers are using our learning management system in their own professional capability development as well. So let me open up some of these pages and show you some of the resources that we discovered that were needed and that we then provided to our teachers. So if I go into this table of contents page here, you can see that they're set up as a series of smaller bite-sized learning units where people can head in. And so the question here, what is remote learning? So we can open this up. There's an introduction to remote learning. It explains how long the session will last, and we have a learning workshop video here. The question you may have is, what is remote learning? Remote learning is when the learner and instructor cannot meet in a traditional classroom setting. I won't go through each of these learning units, but you can see that this is just over 2 minutes. What we're keen on is getting people to consume learning in bite-sized chunks, as opposed to inflicting long learning units on them. There are key points that are listed here. And then there's a one about students. So we've put in resources for teachers to learn, but also how can we help our students move into that remote delivery format as well. I'll show you a couple of others. I'll show you this decision tree, which is helps teachers make decisions about what sort of remote delivery would be appropriate. So are we going to be running a lecture, as you can see here, or a demonstration, or is this a tutorial, a discussion, or an activity? And then there are options about how you would like to run it as a teacher, and then suggestions on what would be the best form to actually make these systems actually work. Let me move back to the start and show you some other pieces. So in this section here, what applications and tools, we can move into uh, the preparation for remote delivery. Again, we have a video that we can run for teachers. It's this one, you can see it's still only almost 2 minutes long, so they're quite bite-sized, easy to consume, and then there's a set of resources underneath and some guidance for our teachers when they're making decisions on whether they would need to make an announcement, set up a group discussion, um, set up course readings, an instructional video, formative quiz, assessment submissions, tutorials, and so forth. So there's a whole series of resources there and guidance for teachers, which we found to be really essential for preparing our teachers and students. I'll take you into this one. There are other applications for remote teaching, and some of the systems that Homesglen uses you can see here, and there are guidance videos that come from the supplier of those programs that you can log into, and it gives you some instructions on how to operate. It was really important for us to, if possible, create a single space where teachers could go and understand how how they would migrate into a remote delivery form. I should also say that if we go into where can I access further information and support, if I take it into this tab here, um, we have uh, we have also harnessed some of the wisdom from other educational institutions around the world. And so you can see that designing effective discussion questions. Well, this is a bit of an instructional video from Stanford University. Key questions for designing online discussions. We've drawn that down from Brown University and so forth. And so we've tried to become a clearinghouse, if you like, for where there is wisdom. And so we are not in what we would say is reinventing the wheel. We are using some of the existing talent and understanding and wisdom that is out there in the world. So look, I just wanted to spend a little bit of time showing you this resource. And I guess in particular, um, what I wanted you to get from this was that um, uh, while we had to develop the capability of the teachers, we also had to develop the capability of the students. So in almost every section there are resources and videos and so forth that we can use to help our students move into a different teaching and learning mode, as at the same time as we help our teachers do the same thing. Um, This is obviously an electronic format. We've listened to our teachers and some of their concerns, and as their concerns have come up, we have developed new training units for them, and we can make this a very dynamic space. So that's just one of the resources that we have developed, and I'm pleased to say that we have certainly had a great deal of success in bringing some of those teachers who are not very comfortable moving into a remote space to make that migration successfully. Now I'll move back across. You will note that I've taken a screen grab of a couple of these slides because as I am sure you are also aware of, I was quite worried that if the technology didn't work for me, that I wouldn't be able to show you in such a dynamic way what the website looked like. I'll hand over to James.
Thanks, Andrew. So next thing that I wanted to talk to you about is one of our teacher training program that we deliver online that has been very popular in Indonesia. It's under the umbrella of the International Skills Training, which was co-developed by the Australian industry and the Australian government to meet international needs. So this is not for delivery in Australia. In fact, it's quite specific that it's only for delivery offshore for us. So the most important part of these are the ITAC courses, which are the International Training and Assessment courses. So these can be delivered face-to-face, but in the current climate, of course, we are offering them online. And we have a number of offers into Indonesian government departments at the moment. And so, of course, I'm speaking here about not only Holmes-Glen, but the other Victorian TAFEs who I mentioned before. So the program has three elements to it: a trainer, TVET trainer, TVET assessor, I should say, of course, with TVET, technical, vocational, education and training. A trainer course, an assessor course, and a master trainer course, the advanced trainer and assessor. So each one of these is quite brief and is quite different from the product that you may be familiar with in Australia, which is the Certificate 4 in Training and Assessment. The Certificate 4 is actually a program that runs for 6 months or equivalent. So this is quite unrealistic for delivery, for us to deliver, consider for offshore delivery. So what we needed was a practical skills-based training in the industry areas of expertise. So what we do with these programs is we teach teachers how to deliver and assess training so that their students can apply the knowledge and skills that are at an internationally expected standard. So the courses focus on the development of high quality teachers who excel at delivering competency-based training. If you could move on to the next slide, please, Andrew. So here we go into a little bit more detail. So the TVET trainer course has 3 units: delivering competency-based training and assessment. Of course, the whole Australian system for the last 30 years has worked around competency-based training and assessment. And it's been something that Australia was an early adopter of and has now become a worldwide standard of vocational training. So we train people how to deliver this training, and how to prepare for it, and also how to learn about formative assessment as opposed to summative assessment that many of you would be more familiar with. So that course actually runs for 1 week. So it's very, very dynamic course and with pre-prepared learning materials and so on that can be sent out, and as I said, can be delivered remotely online. Again, it's usually coupled with the TVET assessor course. So this is learning about assessment, conducting competency-based assessment, participating in the validation of that assessment, and assessment for recognition of existing skills and knowledge, something we would call RPL, recognition of prior learning, or RCC, recognition of current competency. So that program is also 1 week long. So we have it also in Bahasa, so it's fully translated into those languages, into a number of languages, including Indonesian, and can be delivered, as I said, in 2 weeks. If we'd move on to the next one, please, Andrew. Then we have the assessor, the advanced trainer and assessor course, or also known as the master trainer course. So these are for people who have gone through the assessor and trainer courses, and they have shown themselves to have strong leadership, and they go on to do this course, which goes for another 2 weeks and has 5 units, and you can see them there: leadership, developing training programs, engagement with industry, mentoring, and evaluation. So we also, in the Victorian TAFE sector, have developed more systems to go along with this, a back to work program, a library of resources to support our learners, and ongoing mentoring and support for the people who take up these leadership roles. Once they complete this course, these people with the Master Trainer course can go on to train people in the TVET Trainer and the TVET Assessor course under our auspices. So something that we would support them in that delivery in an ongoing way. Let's see. And on to the next one, please, Andrew. So this might give you some idea. Here we are. So we have delivered these programs all over the world. So there you've got a list of those countries: India, China, Vietnam, and so on. So it is effectively quite an inexpensive way to develop skills as a technical trainer. And as I said, it is a fraction of the cost of the TAE, the Certificate for in Training and Assessment. As an example, here is something that we put up to Ristikti last year. I know that it's gone under some changes subsequently, that government department, but it shows you. Here is the phase 1, which is the delivery of the trainer and the assessor. Phase 2, which is the master trainer program. And then there was phase 3, which was, in fact, we were looking at bringing people back to Melbourne, supporting them in learning and so on. So this is obviously under discussion. But it gives you some kind of indication of where our costing would be. And this is a sort of universal costing across the Victorian TAFE sector. So at this stage, I will hand you back to Andrew to have a talk about our VR training. You may be on mute, Andrew.
I think you need to unmute, Andrew. Okay, that's great.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
All good.
Excellent, thank you very much. I'll put on as well. Still okay?
Yep.
Excellent, excellent, thank you. So look, before we go into our case studies, I wanted to explain that there are simply some parts of our teaching programs that are impossible to run in a remote delivery way. And the one example I just wanted to touch on here is about our virtual reality training. We have a tunnelling centre. We teach civil construction, infrastructure development, mining tunnels, rail tunnels, road tunnels, and we use some very advanced and really neat virtual reality. There simply is no way that we can run this in a remote delivered format. And in fact, it was an expensive program to set up, and at the moment we can only run it through social distanced format, and it simply will not migrate into a remote delivered form. Where we have had more success is we have moved our English language program into a live online classroom for our learners from around the globe, and we are indeed teaching English teachers. We have English language teachers here in Melbourne who are delivering in a remote format, and we highlight the English language program here because it's a program that we can't deliver through a pre-recorded program. We needed to deliver it face to face. It's one that really benefits from human interaction. And so what we've done is we have created live video conference sessions where teachers and students can interact live, and then we have a series of assessment programs that work through that as well. You can see there that we've said that we have 3 60-minute live video conference sessions. We found that 60 minutes is about the length of time that people can really bear the learning programs to operate in, particularly if they have to keep re-engaging, and we seem to get good results, good engagement of students if we can limit the size of the course program and each session. We have the ability then also to provide assigned tasks that allow students to apply their learning in realistic contexts, and that can include project work, presentations, research, and so forth. We've enriched our online English language program by providing virtual excursions that focus on popular Melbourne and Australian tourism destinations. And we've used some of the online content available from some of our museums and art galleries and points of interest that we have to offer. English language, we find, is best developed using themes that are of interest to the students, and so we have certainly embedded a lot of those key themes into our teaching program. The courses, as you can see there, can run for as little as 2 weeks, but for each level, it takes about 24 weeks to advance for one IELTS level. So the levels are from elementary through to advanced. And finally, on our online English language program, we have a range of courses that we design and deliver to specifically meet our clients' needs. And we've highlighted there that, again, themed language development, some of the key industries that we find people would like to not only learn the technical training, but also English language development, nursing, early childhood education, hospitality and tourism, business and building and construction. So we develop English language programs for people who are heading into specific industries as well. And we have a host of expert teachers who can help us to do that. James, I will now hand back to you and we'll move into discussion around several case studies about how we deliver remotely and how some of these things have been incredibly successful and some of what we've learned along the way where we've perhaps been tripped up.
Thank you very much, Andrew. And that's quite true that in some of these cases, we can say that we started off thinking that that this would be easy and found out it was actually very challenging, and we did things incorrectly and we learnt from it, and we improved. So I think that we'll go through a couple of these just to let you know. So we work with Oyu Tolgoi, OT. This is a mine, massive copper mine in Mongolia, and it accounts for about 90% of the exports that come out of Mongolia. About 60% of people who are directly or indirectly employed throughout Mongolia by this single mine. So it's extraordinarily important to the Mongolian economy. We are the training partner for Oyu Tolgoi. So we deliver programs in engineering, electrotechnology throughout there, and teacher training. So we've been doing that for the last 9 years. So this is a program that is also where we're delivering Australian qualifications, and we are delivering them in the Mongolian language. So there is a number of really strong challenges here around compliance, relevance, contextualization that have been extraordinarily challenging for us. So the training itself is delivered by Mongolians, who are appropriately skilled and qualified with Australian qualifications to deliver the training. But what we do also to support them is, apart from writing the materials, we have a team of writers back here developing contextualized materials. We also run online assessments, and we do this through Moodle. So we have Moodle used to be our the way that we operated online before we migrated to Brightspace, but we have maintained the Moodle capability for this particular program. So the teachers can at any time, the students, can at any time sit and go through the assessments at a time of their own choosing. We also have a number of native Mongolian speakers on staff to assist us with interpretation and translation. So it makes for a very multicultural staff room, I can assure you. So if we'd go on to the next case study. So this was very interesting. The Rizutsu Resort in Sapporo, just out of Sapporo, in Hokkaido, in northern Japan, decided that they wanted to have English language, stronger English language capability for their staff. It's interesting that Japan, despite the fact that it relies so strongly on international visitors, is in actual fact, it's quite challenging to find English speakers. And so where they are attracting a lot of foreigners into the country, in fact, a lot of Australians, one of the towns near here is called Little Australia because there are so many Australians living there. They decided it was very important to start delivering English language. And the best way to do that, we decided, was through WebEx delivery. So at Holmesglen, we have quite sophisticated systems. We have very large screens. We have cameras that track us as we move across rooms and so on, high quality microphones and excellent internet access. None of these things were at our clients. So we really suffered from very poor Wi-Fi strength. The room setups were inappropriate, and we learnt after our first year of delivery where those deficiencies were, how we would seat people suitable for this kind of delivery, individual headsets, screens, and so on. So now, whenever we do some form of this delivery, what you will also get is very strong support to you on what you must set up initially in order to do things. Very, very practical sort of advice that you will get. The client has been very happy with this, and we will be going back for our 4th year this year. So that's great news for us. So I'd like to move on to the final thing that we wish to talk about today, which is case study number 3, which is our China 2020 partnerships. Now, this was a huge amount of effort for us. This has been probably one of for my team, this has been the key activity this year. And I would like to take you through our journey in it. So we have, for over 20 years, delivered to our partners in China in Ningbo and Jinan. So they're quite separated. And these are very prestigious organizations, institutions in China. The one in Jinan, SICT, is rated in the top 10 in China. And this is where there are literally thousands of these institutions. So these are very prestigious organizations. We delivered accredited Australian diplomas in international business and in accounting. So as part of our contract, 1/3 of it needed to be delivered face-to-face by our teachers. So we have quite sophisticated programs of getting our people over to China, recruiting appropriate people for getting them across there. So suddenly the world changes with COVID-19. We have all experienced this. So we suddenly in China, the students went into lockdown and were at home. But our client came to us and said, we understand you can't come to us, but we would like you to deliver at home to every one of our students and deliver these programs for the next however long this lockdown lasts for. So we had to come to them and say, okay, how do we deliver into multiple locations across China? What do they prefer as a program? So we might move on to the next slide if that's possible, Andrew. So there was a huge amount of urgency. We had never attempted to go online training in China. And as we said, one of our large issues was our WebEx format, which is a little challenging for, we can work out how to get it to one location, but in this case, we needed to get it to hundreds of locations individually and at the same time. So were our resources ready to do this? The answer was no. We didn't have appropriate online resources. Assessments. Did we have the right assessments for this type of online delivery? Answer, no, we didn't. Were our teachers happy to get involved in this? Well, yes, they were. In fact, typically we had teachers who were a little older, and they were very reluctant in any case to travel to China, even if it were possible, because of the dangers for older people with this with COVID-19. So we thought, while most of our assessments were group assignments and more desirable and a feature of our international delivery, we needed to change this into these assessments. We needed to start considering things like we needed to write bilingual manual for the use of the Chinese students and the Australian teachers to ensure the smooth uptake of the technology. The manual was updated daily with feedback from the students and the teachers. We needed to recruit and onboard suitably qualified teachers. We decided that in the first case, we would be better off recruiting bilingual teachers, the people who are native speakers of Chinese. So this was quite a little more of a challenge to find these people who were suitably qualified, but we did. So our team, I'm blessed to have an excellent team of native speaking, 3 who are native speaking Chinese, who were able to coordinate with our partners before that delivery. Were the teachers capable of the being tech savvy in this? Well, no. That was really another very large issue for us. We needed to retrain our teachers. So here's the solutions. We decided that we would need 2 platforms, and as well as our homeschooling one, we also had to use another one that was able to get into these homes. The writing of the bilingual manual was undertaken by one of our Chinese-speaking staff and completed. So we managed to find 3 of these bilingual teachers who had suitable qualifications, who could deliver, and fortunately they were also extraordinarily good and experienced in online training. So we ran teaching trials to make sure everything would work, and my team, my Homeschooling China team members, actually enrolled into these programs so that they could observe and review all of the sessions as they were delivered by the teacher. We needed to make changes to the timetable because what we found, as Andrew spoke of earlier, that you can't do too much of this. It's a bit overwhelming. So we had to shorten the periods of the classes, but because they had been shortened, we needed to make more of them. So we needed to move into Saturday and sometimes even Sunday delivery of our programs to make it possible. Move on to the next one, possibly, Andrew. Yeah, so because some of our teachers that we recruited were not familiar with China, we also needed to do a lot of cultural training, but not only about things like our policies and regulations, but you would be aware that things can be quite politicized in China, and so we would counsel people on topics that they should not raise when doing their teaching. So we kept on running classes with the teachers until they were very confident of the technology. These are not people necessarily, particularly the local Australian teachers, who were confident of this technology, and so a lot of teaching of them was quite important. To that end, we set up a community of practice for that group which they used an online tool. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's called House Party. So it's generally used for people to, to meet up with friends and so on. But what we used it for was as a very informal way for our teachers to catch up simply and talk to one another about their best experience of teaching, which has been extraordinarily valuable. So my team has worked very closely with them. Monitoring, as I said, they actually enrolled in the classes to do to monitor the delivery, and they would have their mobile phones with them to ring the teacher if they wished to alert them to something that was going on. So at the same time, we found ourselves with a little shortfall in experience with teachers with appropriate qualifications. And so we ran professional development, which is still ongoing even today, of getting people suitably qualified so that they can continue to teach in those programs. So moving on to the next one, please, Andrew. So things like how do we working across with the client over there? So they have a system called class monitors. And so we would use this is like a lead student within the group. So we would use them to help us to make sure that people were attending. It's almost like a prefect arrangement to make sure that things were happening. Before anybody started, the native English speakers would start, we would certainly go over and over again on that online platform. Some of the teachers actually came back for 5 sessions before they had their confidence built up enough to do it. But our team was up for the challenge. So by the time we got to the end of each unit, you run evaluations to find out from the students what they thought on content, material, what they thought of the teacher. And for all of these things, this made us able to come back, counsel, advise the teacher, come back to the community of practice and talk about those things openly to see what we could do better. So my team members also spoke to the Chinese students regularly through this. How did it work out? Well, very, very well. We have had letters written by the presidents of the institute back to us, back to our president, to say how happy they were with this arrangement. Really, when we look at it, it was not perfect. It was not ideal. It was what we would describe as clunky to some extent, but by working very closely with our client, we were able to achieve a great result. And interestingly, we ended up, because they were very, very happy to, we received payment for what was doing, it actually cost us less than it normally did because we didn't actually have to send teachers across there. So extraordinarily, it's actually reduced our costs in the delivery, despite the fact that we had a lot more work going on. As you'll see with those pictures, some of the students actually used handheld devices to do their work. So we asked them to send some pictures of them undergoing their training with Homesglen. And I was amused to see that one of them was, at least one of them here, is using pen and paper and a mobile phone to do their learning. So it's a little bit of a sign of the time. So, but the key to our success, I've got to say, has been we have been fantastically fortunate to have our China team and 3 native-speaking Chinese members of Helen, Raymond and Claire, who were committed to making the whole program very successful. Thank you.
So can you hear me, James?
Yes.
Yep.
Fantastic. Thank you. So that brings us to the end of our presentation. Look, in summary, I think it's about a key messaging there is that you need to identify what you can do, and we found that we had capability in unlikely places and through our institute. We first supported our teachers and managers, but then we supported our students. It was a vital part of making this thing work. We have an IT department that worked with our teacher trainers, and as I showed you earlier, we developed training sessions for the teachers and support structures for the students as well. We're very happy to receive any of your questions now. Nia.
Yes, thank you very much, Andrew and James, for a very interesting presentation. Just would like to share with you that we have almost 300 participants here. And as you mentioned earlier, with your experience working in Indonesia, many of the participants here are coming from the eastern part of Indonesia. I see people from Merauke, from Mapi, Maluku, Papua, West Papua, which is great. So yeah, and they have also a lot of questions for you here already. So I'm just going to summarize a little bit of your presentation for the participants in the Indonesian language. Baik, Bapak Ibu, kita sudah dengarkan presentasinya. Saya mungkin akan simpulkan sedikit, gitu ya. Tadi mereka sudah bercerita pengalaman mereka bekerja di berbagai negara, gitu, dan kemudian juga program-program apa yang mereka miliki. Tadi di awal mereka cerita banyak tentang program pelatihan bagi guru, gitu, bagaimana mempersiapkan guru agar bisa memberikan pelatihan secara online. Dan tadi saya lihat juga sudah cukup banyak pertanyaan terkait ini. Kemudian tadi sharing mengenai pengalaman-pengalaman mereka. Kalau saya bisa simpulkan, ketika mereka membuat pelatihan daring atau pelatihan online itu banyak sekali faktor yang dipertimbangkan. Mulai dari infrastrukturnya, apakah ada sambungan internet, apakah muridnya bisa punya komputer atau tidak, atau apakah sebaiknya menggunakan aplikasi yang hanya memerlukan handphone, kemudian bagaimana dengan web browsernya, apa yang harus dipakai, gitu. Ada kebijakan-kebijakan tertentu dari negaranya, atau kebijakan-kebijakan tertentu dari kliennya, gitu. Itu semua juga menjadi pertimbangan ketika membuat pembelajaran daring. Dan saya lihat juga pertanyaan yang diajukan oleh Bapak Ibu banyak ya, gitu, terkait dengan persiapan atau sistem-sistem yang dibutuhkan, gitu. Kemudian tadi juga di presentasinya sempat di-sharing bagaimana penyesuaian terhadap situasi pandemi COVID, bagaimana mereka mengatur ruang kelas gitu supaya tetap ada jaga jarak secara fisik ya sesuai dengan aturan COVID gitu. Dan bagaimana kemudian mereka juga harus secara cepat memperkuat atau mengubah materi-materinya yang tadinya offline, dirubah menjadi online juga karena adanya COVID ini. Nah, kurang lebih tadi itu presentasinya. Saya sekarang akan coba melemparkan pertanyaan Bapak Ibu kepada Pak Andrew dan juga kepada Pak James. So, James and Andrew, I would like to start with the questions. Okay. So there is one question about the system here. So you were talking about how you develop the learning management system. Could you share a little bit more how you prepare or how you decide what platform to use in order for you to have an effective and efficient LMS? And then do you have any lesson learned or failure in the process that you can also probably share with us?
Sure.
Do you want to head off, Andrew?
Yeah, if I can, James. Look, Homeschool has had a learning management system for a number of years, and we do what we call blended delivery, what It's known as blended delivery. Involves some practical, involves some electronic, but it also allows a place for learning, teaching and learning material to be housed. We use Brightspace. Other major systems that we know of are Blackboard, Moodle, and Seesaw. And my advice about making a choice around this, first of all, we would consider the cost. Secondly, the effectiveness and the features of it. Thirdly, we needed to consider the interoperability of it, how it interacted with other systems that we had. So does it inform our student management system about student success when they have achieved a productive result as through the assessment process? So that interoperability is really important for us. And I think the last thing I'd say on this before handing to James is that my advice would be to pick a big brand, something that is popularly used by other organisations, and to take the product off the shelf. So not to do too much, not to deviate too much from the standard product, because if you take the standard product then you get far more support for it if something starts to go wrong. James.
Yes, I would absolutely endorse that. The costs will blow out as you decide that you wish to customize to become something different to what the product is originally designed for. So choose carefully. Some of the sort of open source options, such as Moodle, do allow for a large amount of sort of creative use, which is why Moodle has been very popular over a long time, and moderately low cost. I know what the cost of our license is, and it's still we're still paying a decent amount of money that for it every year, but so cost is certainly one. For the decision we made in China was a very difficult one, where we said that the one that we had really couldn't be used to go off and speak to these Chinese students sitting in their homes. So we had to move to a different platform altogether, one that was Chinese, that the students would be able to readily use and understand. Now, that's not something that we would normally do, and we certainly wouldn't recommend it, but under the circumstances, we had to do that. Fortunately, the students are now back into their classrooms, and we are able to use more standard procedures. But I suppose that we would say necessity is the mother of invention, and so that we needed by necessity to find another solution at that time to assist us in doing it. But so in times such as these, difficult times, strange decisions sometimes are made. But I absolutely endorse Andrew's point that choose something off the shelf and with the sort of operating ability that suits your needs.
Okay, so thank you very much. So basically, you consider, so your suggestion is in selecting the LMS is to select a platform that is first compatible with other program or other system that we have, and then also consider whether it's suitable in the local condition. You mentioned many times that you have to make a lot of adjustment in your work in China because of the condition there. So if there is a similar condition, then there is also something that we have to consider. And third is, of course, the cost, what budget we have in order to select the platform. And the fourth, and that you mentioned is very important, is how the system can be used or how it interact with the users. Yeah, so thank you very much for that answer. So I'm going to move forward with the next question. So here you share a lot about the English training. And so here some of the question is, if you can repeat a little bit about the cost of the English training, and then is it available only for institution that you are partnering with, or if I may say client, or is it open for public? Is teachers here can register and participate, for example? Can you, elaborate a little bit more on your English training?
Andrew, do you want me to have a go at this one?
If you want to start on this one, James, yes.
Yep, for sure. Okay, so the program, anybody can enter the program. One of the great virtues of this program is that anybody can do it. So we have two streams of this, one which is preparation for study, and the other one is more for learning conversational English, creating a friendly environment that people enjoy the learning experience, the virtual tours, the upbeat sort of activities that the students undertake so they can enjoy it. We can do it for specific groups should you want to. We can also say, oh, well, if you've got a nursing group coming in, which we have done, we've had a Korean nursing group come in, we are able to provide that sort of service too. So it's ultimately very, very flexible, and I see Andrew's got something on costs there. So we have kept our costs very much down because we understand that in a lot of these markets that we're going into are very, very competitive. And so we do want to make sure that people can have that learning experience. We've just put together a video talking about it, and it is subtitled in Bahasa. And so we may send out a link to you when that's up, and so that you can distribute it amongst the listeners and the viewers here today.
Well, that's great. That will be great. Thank you very much. Is that the same case also for the TVET trainer, the TVET trainer courses, the ITEC? There are 3 training under the ITEC, right? Is that is that the same thing that I can just apply, or do I need to be a part of an institution, or how does it work for people to access the training? Because the participants here are commenting about it, and that sounds great, and I think a lot of participants are interested to participate in that kind of training. Yeah.
So that's a really interesting question, and we had not actually considered it as for sort of individuals coming in. We've really offered it to organisations, institutions, educational institutions, governments, and so on, so that they would put together a group. But thank you for that question, because it's given us an exciting business idea that we may be able to follow up on. So really the class it's designed so that the students would be sitting in the same class, so you would be going to them. We haven't quite addressed the issues around isolation for that program, but it would be no problem. We would be able to do that. But more suitably, the course is designed for group activities and so on. So having a situation they were so separated would be an interesting challenge for us, but we would certainly be happy to consider it.
Ya, thank you. Ya, Bapak Ibu, tadi saya lihat banyak pertanyaan gitu, baik apakah training TVET yang tadi ada trainer, kemudian ada asesor, ada master trainer, apakah bisa diikuti ya? Tadi lumayan banyak pertanyaan mengenai itu. Dan ternyata kalau untuk individual tiba-tiba mau ikutan gitu, memang belum tersedia. Biasanya training ini disediakan untuk institusi atau organisasi. Jadi mungkin Bapak Ibu perlu usul nih ke sekolah atau ke politeknik atau ke universitas tempat Bapak Ibu bekerja untuk mungkin bisa mempertimbangkan bagaimana satu institusi Bapak Ibu bisa mengakses training ini secara bersama-sama. Okay, and then I'll move forward to the next question. And wait, there are a lot of questions here, so wait. You were talking quite a lot about preparing teachers. So you have this remote learning, and you shown a very interesting program how you support the teachers. The question here is not about the teacher though, it's about the students. What kind of support that Homesgen provided to students, considering, as you also mentioned, sometimes they probably come from areas where there are no internet connection, or maybe they do not have the sufficient gadgets or computer. What kind of consideration that you use in order to make sure that the students are also supported?
Andrew, did you want to start on this one?
Yeah. Yep, very happy to start on that one. It is very important to support the students, and you will have seen when I showed that resource that we have some videos for students to be able to set up their own learning spaces and make sure that they have the right sets of technologies. We had support sessions for making sure that people were downloading the right applications and programs so that they were fully set up before they started. And we also ran what we called demonstration sessions to make sure that people had an opportunity to test their technology before they ended up actually in the learning environment. We found that in general, most of our students had a device that would allow them to access the learning management system. What we have found through this as COVID unraveled, we discovered that there were some students who didn't have a computer at home or a device. And in fact, our staff have donated computers and our IT department has reprogrammed them and set them up so that the students can actually take those computers away and use them in their home environment. But the access to the electronic environment was absolutely vital. We have found that some of our students didn't have the internet at home, and when in a period of lockdown, that was very important that they could set up the internet, and we have been providing them with vouchers, credit into access of internet. We didn't want to get into a situation where we were driving around the city handing people paper packs of paper-based resources. Because we applied a fairly strict remote learning overlay where possible, it meant that there were far fewer students on campus except for practical items. We find that our libraries and our common learning areas that have computers in them are being are very empty, and we also invited students who had access problems and so forth to actually come and use our computers here on campus. But as I said and showed you earlier, we have very strict social distancing rules, and we have people who are patrolling the campus to make sure that there are no breaches of those social distancing rules.
Okay, and still related with this topic is that you also mentioned that you use chat apps, and that depends on the country where you work, like you use Kakao maybe, and then you use WhatsApp. And I'm just wondering, how do you use that in delivering the online material? Is that like a a person is holding on into WhatsApp all the time so that I can always ask 24 hours, or is there like an automatic response to the WhatsApp? How does that work? Can you explain?
Yeah, so it's not used for the actual delivery of those
Okay.
programs, but it's used as a support, an adjunct to support the learners. So so in the case of, say, WeChat, which is an amazing app,
in China,
our teachers and our China team have formed a bunch of WeChat groups that would include their class, and so the students, so that the students can use it as in a sort of a chat format to come back to the teacher or to our support team to ask questions about it.
Yeah.
Part of our review system was all done via WeChat, because what we find is we send an email to people, say they're going up to their qq.com site, you'll never hear back from them. Send them something on WeChat, you will hear back 5 seconds later. So, so it's
Same
a matter
here.
of, yeah. So it's a matter of choosing the right thing. So I think you know, WhatsApp would be a sort of a very widely used tool in Indonesia, I imagine, and just normal sort of chat devices. But certainly for, say, in Kakao for our Koreans, for our, and of course, and in Japan, I can't remember what it's called, the one in Japan, but each country has their particular one.
Yeah.
And because young people respond to it, and you will find that is, so it is a support mechanism to go along with your normal delivery methodology.
Yeah.
Yes, I'd like to support that, if I may, in that one of the things that our learning management system allows us to do is to create and house evidence of assessment, which our regulators, our TVET regulators, are very strict about. We have to have very safe and secure places to house what is a comprehensive body of evidence of assessment. And some of those apps that we've talked about don't allow us to do that, so they are very complementary to the other sort of systems that we use.
Yeah. So you just mentioned the thing that I'm going to ask next. When we talk about preparing the student and the teachers and the need for infrastructure, you know, like gadgets, equipment, internet connectivity, and even electricity connectivity in the case of some areas in Indonesia, do you provide that to the teachers and the students, or do they have to have it their own, or do especially for the student, do they get funding from the government? How does that work to make sure that especially in this pandemic era, to make sure that the students are being supported? Is there any extra funding or scholarship or something like that?
So Holmes Glen has a foundation. It's a philanthropic body that is attached to our institute. It has never been more important for that foundation than it is at the moment. In particular, I'd highlight that while our own citizens have been able to access, many of whom have lost their jobs because of this pandemic, and so are struggling to support themselves, the government has provided welfare for our own citizens. For international students, we as an institute have done a number of things. We've got scholarships, and we've waived payment. We have waived the rents in a student accommodation. We have partnered up with other welfare and support organisations. We would distribute hundreds of meals every day and food packs and money to make sure that our students it's not just about their educational continuity, it's about making sure that their well-being is nurtured. it's very hard to learn effectively if you don't have food. So it has been a desperate period for us, and I think that that's probably true globally. Um, but certainly we've used whatever resources that we could gather together. And I have to say that I've been very proud of staff who have donated food and donated computers, as I mentioned before, in support of our students.
We've also had the Victorian government has been very supportive of those international students. It's a huge industry for Victoria. In fact, the state is completely reliant on international student training. So we have, there's been handouts from the government we've got approximately 40,000 students, international students enrolled at universities, TAFEs and vocational providers, and English language colleges and so on. So the government provided a one-off payment for $1,000 for those students to ease the burden, and they're looking at additional support. But certainly, as Andrew mentioned, we have been very conscious of supporting those students, and it's been extraordinarily important work that's been done here at the Institute and by many other institutes in Australia.
Okay, so there are support from the government, but also your own institution waive some of the fees, like the fees related to their need to come in. Now that they don't have to come, so they don't have to pay for that fee. So there are certainly a lot of support that is provided to the students in this time. Okay, and then I'll move forward to the next question, which is quite technical. Okay, this is an interesting question. There is one question about the virtual reality. You showed a slide about it, and you mentioned that it's very expensive. So the question here, does Holmes Glen has its own production center to prepare it, or do you work with a third party to prepare the VR program? And the question is like, how much do we have to spend just to develop one course, for example, with a virtual reality modality?
It's a good question, and the answer is scary. In that it's very expensive. We don't have the capability in our own staff, and so we do contract with a third party. So the difference between virtual reality and augmented reality is that the virtual reality creates the artificial habitat. So there's the activity happening inside an artificial habitat. And what we've, the case that I was showing earlier is about our tunnelling centre, and I'll share with you a photo of what we've created as this is a rail tunnel that's currently that's part of our training. That's a training facility that we've just built, but it's exactly the same as the rail tunnels that are currently being built underneath Melbourne, and it's 7 meters wide. That's a door at the end. You can see them. And what we've created is augmented reality, because we've now created a real life habitat for it. So you stand in there with your goggles, and a tunnel boring machine, it moves through. If you don't get out of the way, you get hit. And we've created a live environment and the augmented reality in that space. In terms of the cost of development, we obviously have large qualifications. We don't put the whole qualification into an augmented or a virtual reality form. We do learning units or learning objects inside that, and for specific purposes. But really, we're talking about somewhere between $30,000 and $50,000 for each of those units to be developed. I don't know that there's any way of getting around that cheaply. but they're incredibly high quality resources once they're developed.
And so when you deliver, so 30,000 to 50,000 is just for one learning unit?
Yep, just for
that's
one
very
learning
expensive.
unit.
Yeah, that's very
That's
expensive.
very,
Yeah.
yeah.
And so if you decide to deliver the training with this virtual reality, so how about the Google? So does the student have to have it at home or?
No, and this is again, we can't deliver this remotely because of the cost of the hardware, the goggles and so forth.
Exactly. Yeah.
So we have in our virtual reality training space, we have a very large room with four headsets, four sets of goggles, and so we've got really ample social distancing. We have to wipe everything down with sanitizer and so forth between the users, obviously using it. But we buy all of that hardware, and we don't expect the students to buy that.
Yeah, I know it's very expensive. So you have it on site in your campus.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do.
Yeah. Okay. But what if I can ask again? It's like if it's very expensive, but you still have it. You said it's very expensive, but you still have it. To what extent do you think that a vocational training or like a practical skills really need to be learned through a virtuality, and to what extent that it has to be with virtual reality?
The reason we've invested in the VR and AR in this space is because of the highly technical and highly dangerous aspect of this training. So people who are inexperienced with at least the simulated environment, being in a tunnel is a very dangerous place to go, and we believe it's better for a student to be hit with a virtual tunnel boring machine than a real one.
Of course. Okay. Okay, let me go on and look for the next questions. So the next questions is also about a specific sector. A lot of our participants here come from the health institution or health polytechnic. So many of the questions here, and you mentioned a little bit more, but we want to hear a little bit more about it. How do you provide distance learning or online learning when we talk about healthcare workers like nurse or even doctor? They have to be able to do some things with the real patients, right? So can you share a little bit more? How do you manage in that area?
Again, this is one of those areas where there are some things that simply can't be done remotely.
Okay.
We have we've reduced our class sizes, so where perhaps before we would have 16 students in a workshop or a training room, we now have 8 or however number we can teach safely, and it's caused great challenges for us in that our workshops and training rooms were full before. Now we've got the same number of students, but half the number of students in each class, so we need it for twice the amount of time. So we have classes that are starting very early, finishing very late, being timetabled across 6 days a week in order to ensure that students can continue to progress their learning programs.
Oke. Ya, Bapak Ibu tadi lumayan banyak ya pertanyaan dari Bapak Ibu yang di bidang kesehatan gitu ya, nanya bagaimana caranya bisa training jarak jauh ketika kita bicara tentang cara-cara menangani pasien. Sebenarnya hal ini juga sempat dibahas di sesi 3 minggu lalu dari webinar ini, dan memang tidak bisa 100%. Pada kenyataannya tetap harus ada pelatihan yang dilakukan langsung, bertemu langsung gitu. Mungkin bukan di rumah sakit beneran gitu, tapi tetap harus datang ke institusi pendidikan dan berlatih bagaimana caranya berinteraksi langsung dengan orang. Yang perlu diperhatikan dan sudah dibahas di sesi sebelumnya adalah tetap harus mempraktekkan situasi dari COVID. Jadi ketika memang harus datang ke institusi pendidikan, pastikan tetap ada jaga fisik ya minimal 1,5 meter, tetap harus cuci tangan. Jadi harus ada prosedur-prosedur kesehatan terkait dengan COVID-19 yang dilakukan ketika pesertanya datang ke institusi pelatihan dari Bapak dan Ibu. Okay, Andrew and James, I'm gonna move forward to the next question.
Nia, if I can just make just a quick point about the nursing. That we actually have a quite sophisticated simulation centre at our nursing area. So part of the protection for our students is they're actually not currently being exposed to people that are maybe carrying disease, and it also protects those people who are unwell from being exposed to student nurses too. So it works both ways. But in fact, we have a hospital, Holmes Glen Hospital, which is a fully operating hospital with an emergency department operating on our campus. So we're very fortunate indeed to have those facilities. So it's used for nursing, paramedical, and medical education.
Thank you, James. Yes. Yeah, well, that's great. You have your own facility, but in terms of online learning or distance learning, still, when we talk about healthcare workers, then so far it cannot be done 100% online. Some sessions, it has to be delivered on the site or in real life situation. Okay, so I will move forward to the next question. We're back again with sector. There are questions here. Do you have training on the maritime sector? Have you ever done it? And if you have, can you share about it?
That's not one of the areas that Holmes Glen covers.
Okay.
We do across the Victorian TAFE network. There are some TAFEs that specialise in certain areas. We have certainly got one TAFE that specialises in boat building. We have a couple of TAFEs. Typically, they sit on the coast and they specialise in maritime, both engineering, but also the role of being a seaman. And but that's not one that Holmes Glen offers, no.
Okay, thank you. Can you share with us like which institution are specializing in providing training on maritime?
Could I email you for then sharing, and we'll provide some links across to the right people and places.
Sure. Yes, sure. Thank you very much. Ya, Bapak Ibu tadi juga lumayan banyak ya yang nanya ada pelatihan nggak untuk di bidang maritim. Sayangnya belum, tapi nanti tapi sebenarnya kalau dari Holmes Glen sendiri belum, tapi kalau dari TAFE atau pendidikan konsorsium pendidikan vokasi di Australia itu pastinya ada. Jadi nanti Pak Andrew dan James akan berbagi kepada kami gitu apa nama institusinya. Okay. Now, our next question is going back to the students. So as you mentioned and as you know, in Indonesia we have internet connectivity is still quite expensive. Even in Java Island, it's not a cheap thing, especially for accessing video or streaming movie video and things like that, which require a big chunk of data that can be expensive. Also, and when we move forward to the eastern part of Indonesia, we don't have a good internet connection. Sometimes we don't even have electricity connection. So do you think it's better to use synchronized or unsynchronized approach in a situation where internet connection is limited? And
Yeah,
will that do you think will that affect the outcome of the learning outcomes of the students?
yeah. Look, it's a really interesting one. So for us, the cheapest and easiest online training is synchronous training. So where we are able to simply pop a teacher in front of a camera and have them talk to a group that are sitting somewhere else in the world, that is by far the cheapest way to do that training. It
Like
is,
this one,
and
yeah?
yeah, exactly, just like this. That is, of course, not always possible. So this is why we also provide not only the asynchronous, where they will join up to, say, our Bright Space and be able to do some online units, but we can also provide some distance learning materials where we would actually provide you with textbooks that we can then work our way through. So there are other possibilities. We would probably, under those circumstances, avoid doing something like accredited training because of the high regulatory requirements that are around them. So we would be looking more at a maybe customized training for somebody under those circumstances. But it is certainly possible, and we are certainly open to discussing it with people if they find themselves in a position where they don't have sophisticated connections to the internet.
Okay, thank you, James. Andrew, you want to say something?
I think that the two complement each other very well.
Okay.
I spoke earlier about blended learning. What we've
Yeah.
seen become people have quite a lot of interest in here is the flipped classroom model,
Yeah.
where
Yeah.
there's the provision of asynchronous material, a video of a teacher delivering content, and then a kind of a tutorial or a workshop then between either the teacher or a tutor to answer questions, unpack what's happened inside that learning object, and that really does need to be synchronous, and that's the rich part of the learning experience.
Okay. Thank you, Andrew. Let me check again our list of questions. Okay, so the next question is relates to shifting from offline to online learning. Is there a change in terms of duration for the students? Like maybe a certain course was used to be 6 months, and now that it's online, we can finish it in 3 months. And you mentioned a little bit about some part of the training is being more cost effective, but there are also more costs when we talk about developing the material. So yeah, what do you think is about the time needed and also the cost needed, which is more efficient? Is it online or offline?
Several years ago in Australia, there was an endeavour, there was an idea that it would be much cheaper for a TVET institution to run courses if we could do it online. And what we found was that was actually a myth. The most expensive part of a course is the teacher, and the work that goes into preparation for really effective quality teaching product. And what we found is that you couldn't just take a page of text and put it online and
Yeah,
expect that students would find that a rich learning experience.
yeah,
And so in fact, I think that the time is probably about the same. It's there's a lot of work that goes into preparation. Our teachers have worked incredibly hard in the last 3 months since COVID broke, and what we're finding is that our students are still hungry for as we spoke about before, the synchronous interactivity with their teachers. So I think it's about the same.
okay.
Yeah,
You want to say something, James? Yeah.
Just to add to that, it was interesting at a previous institute I worked at, they had very sophisticated online resources for around hairdressing. And so what happened was that the students would undertaking that study were able to accelerate their study, but it was still taking them the same amount of time, just as Andrew has said. It's just that they would devote more hours and were, because they could spend more hours because of the online nature of the course, they were able to do it more quickly. But it didn't actually reduce the amount of time that they were effectively doing the learning. It's just that they were able to do more of it and have more access to the training at the time. But generally, I really think that we've probably found that, as Andrew said, that it's the online learning, because of the nature of it, the experiences that we've had with it, it's probably likely to be slower rather than quicker. But I'm sure there's exceptions.
Okay, thank you very much, James. So that's about all the questions that summarized from that we summarized and we asked you. And now I would just like to summarize all this question and answer for the audience. Baik, Bapak Ibu, demikian sesi tanya jawabnya. Mungkin saya coba rangkum sedikit. Jadi tadi sudah ada pertanyaan dan sudah dijawab oleh Pak Andrew dan Pak James itu terkait persiapannya, mempersiapkan bagaimana sistem pembelajaran online. Gitu. Tadi dari sisi persiapan memang banyak sekali waktu yang harus disiapkan, baik dari infrastrukturnya, materinya, gurunya, kemudian juga memikirkan bagaimana semua itu bisa siap bagi siswanya gitu. Jadi tadi sudah dijelaskan. Kemudian untuk topik-topiknya gitu, Homesgen, Bapak Ibu bisa lihat di layar, di situ ada kontaknya kalau Bapak Ibu mau kontak Homesgen. Mereka tadi sudah punya pengalaman di bidang kesehatan ya, untuk pekerja kesehatan, misalnya seperti suster, mereka punya pelatihan-pelatihan seperti itu. Kemudian juga punya pelatihan untuk di bidang vokasi seperti bagaimana caranya menjadi TVET trainer, TVET assessor, dan juga menjadi master trainer. Walaupun itu mesti lewat institusi, mereka juga sudah banyak sekali pengalaman mengadakan pelatihan-pelatihan bahasa Inggris, baik yang sifatnya umum maupun bahasa Inggris yang spesifik dibuat untuk industrinya. Jadi isinya tuh bahasa-bahasa atau istilah-istilah yang khusus dengan industrinya. Tapi sayangnya memang mereka belum ada pelatihan di bidang maritim. Nanti akan diberikan informasi institusi mana di Australia yang punya pelatihan di bidang maritim. Kemudian tadi juga ada pertanyaan mengenai bagaimana maaf. Kemudian tadi juga ada pertanyaan ya mengenai bagaimana kita bisa memikirkan keterbatasan internet atau keterbatasan akses dari para murid kita gitu. Dan tadi dinyatakan itu dari Homesgen sendiri punya kebijakan-kebijakan tertentu untuk memastikan bahwa siswa bisa tetap belajar. Tapi di samping itu pemerintahnya juga memberikan bantuan-bantuan tertentu terutama di masa pandemi ini. Kemudian tadi juga sempat ada pertanyaan mengenai teknik-teknik ya atau aplikasi-aplikasi yang juga digunakan bagi siswa gitu seperti WhatsApp atau menggunakan online apa dan sebagainya. Dan tadi dinyatakan bahwa silahkan hal-hal seperti ini sangat disesuaikan dengan kebutuhan lokal. Kalau di Indonesia kan WhatsApp ya yang populer gitu. Nah kalau di negara lain mungkin chatting lain yang lebih populer. Dan aplikasi chat ini seperti ini sebenarnya itu lebih banyak untuk diskusi. Jadi ada kayak kita tahu lah ya kita banyak sekali grup WhatsApp masing-masing. Saya rasa kita punya banyak grup WhatsApp gitu. Nah itu bisa bikin grup WhatsApp dengan guru supaya bisa ngobrol, supaya bisa dapat support. Tapi tetap materi pembelajarannya itu ada di online gitu, ada di platform yang harus diakses online. Dan kalau ternyata itu tidak bisa juga karena adanya keterbatasan internet, maka bisa dipertimbangkan untuk menyediakan buku. Tetap cara-cara tradisional kita pikirkan bagaimana kita mengantarkan buku ke daerah-daerah yang tidak ada internet gitu. Dan mungkin kalau dari saya sendiri ini dari ILO sendiri bisa menambahkan, mungkin bisa dipertimbangkan di daerah-daerah terpencil tuh kita bikin seperti pusat pembelajaran masyarakat. Jadi seperti puskesmas, tapi bukan untuk kesehatan, melainkan untuk belajar. Jadi mungkin bisa kita coba sama-sama bicarakan apakah memungkinkan kita buat seperti itu. Ada pusat, ada komputer-komputer di situ, dan masyarakat yang ingin pakai komputer, ingin pakai internet, bisa datang ke pusat itu sehingga mereka bisa belajar. Itu juga salah satu solusi yang bisa dipertimbangkan untuk Indonesia. Baik, mohon maaf ya Bapak Ibu, saya sambil batuk-batuk gitu. Kurang lebih seperti itu. Saya sekarang akan memberikan sedikit waktu bagi Andrew dan James, mungkin mau memberikan paparan penutup sebelum saya nanti mau memberikan beberapa informasi tambahan buat peserta. Do you wanna say something, Andrew or James, to just to close up the session?
Yeah, look, I would like to reiterate our thanks for being invited to be part of this conversation today. I think it's terrific that you can bring 280 people in your professional people in to engage with a conversation around how we can fulfill our duties as educators and to serve the learning needs of our students. So congratulations to you, and we wish you all the very best. And James has in the chat section there put forward our email address, and we would certainly welcome any further communications if you wish for us to be able to help you. Maybe we can, maybe we can't. I think that we're all faced with these challenges together, but certainly if we can, we'd certainly be delighted to try and help you. So thank you very much, Terima kasih, and thank you for your time today. James?
Yeah, it's been a great privilege, and Nia, you've done an absolutely fantastic job on bringing this together and guiding us through what needs to be done. And we're always very, very impressed by somebody who's so brilliant with their bilingual skills. So congratulations to you. Thank you to everyone. Selamat tinggal. And we hope to hear from you again, and we'll be delighted to meet up with you again at some opportunity.
Thank you very much, Andrew and James. Thank you very much. We learn a lot from you. Ya, baik Bapak Ibu, saya mau mengingatkan sesi 5 akan diadakan pada minggu depan, dan topiknya itu sangat terkait dengan topik hari ini. Hari ini bicara mengenai apa sistem yang dibutuhkan dan biayanya. Nah, minggu depan kita akan bicara mengenai pusat produksinya. Kalau kita mau menyiapkan materi, tadi juga ada pertanyaan terkait ini, mau menyiapkan materinya apakah harus siapkan sendiri atau harus punya pusat produksi atau bagaimana. Minggu depan kita akan dengarkan pengalaman dari Australia, tapi selain itu minggu depan kami juga akan menampilkan pembicara dari universitas terbuka yang sudah berpuluh-puluh tahun memang memberikan pelatihan secara online. Jadi silakan kalau Bapak Ibu tertarik, nanti bisa mulai mendaftarkan diri mulai Senin minggu depan. Untuk sesi ini kami minta tolong Bapak Ibu untuk memberikan sedikit umpan balik dengan menuliskan saja di ruang chat apakah bermanfaat, apa yang bisa diperbaiki dari sesi ini, topik apa lagi yang kira-kira menarik. Silakan Bapak Ibu, kami ingin mendengar sedikit umpan balik dari Bapak Ibu. Sambil saya berbicara, silakan Bapak Ibu bisa menuliskan sedikit umpan balik. Terima kasih banyak. Dan untuk bahan presentasi hari ini, silahkan bisa diunduh di situsnya ILO Jakarta. Tadi juga sudah dituliskan di chat, saya tampilkan kembali di sini. Semua materi presentasi dari sesi 1 sampai sesi 4 bisa diakses di tautan ini. Selain itu, kalau Bapak Ibu ingin mendengarkan sesinya, bisa ditonton ulang di YouTube ILO TV Indonesia. Jadi tidak usah khawatir kalau misalnya ingin mendengarkan lagi, silakan nonton lagi YouTube-nya, bisa ditonton berkali-kali. Silakan Bapak Ibu. Kami akan biarkan ini terbuka mungkin untuk sekitar 5 menit lagi sebelum kita semua bisa meninggalkan sesi webinar ini. Baik, so terima kasih Bapak Ibu, saya lihat sudah banyak umpan balik yang masuk. Itu link YouTube-nya kami tuliskan di chat, link materinya juga kami tuliskan di chat. Banyak pertanyaan mengenai sertifikat. Kami informasikan kami memang tidak memberikan sertifikat, e-sertifikat untuk keikutsertaan di seri webinar ini. Kami berharap kami percaya tanpa adanya sertifikat kita semua tetap merasakan manfaat dari keikutsertaan di webinar ini. Terima kasih. Mungkin kami akan menutup sesi ini. Selamat siang semuanya, selamat makan siang, dan selamat beraktivitas kembali. Thank you, Andrew and James. Bye. Selamat siang semuanya. Iya, bye.